Radhe Radhe. Today is Saturday, 12th April 2025. Happy Hanuman Jayanti wishes, first of all, to everyone. Jai Bajrangbali, and a festive weekend, of course, with celebrations. And so we now present to you this recap video for today's Bhagavad Gita study session. Bringing up the screen, you'll see we had covered three verses in class and got through, chapter 10, verses 38, 39, and 40. Prior to that was the usual recap quiz covering chapter 10, verses 36 and 37. You can look at the description for this video to go to the usual community portal page. That's the free repository where you can get all the slides for the quiz questions and everything you're seeing on the screen and other material for your benefit and practice. So after those quiz questions, we then started off with chapter 10, verse 38. Dando damayatam asmi, nitir asmi jigishatam, maunam chaivasmi guhyanam, jnanam jnanavatam aham. So, chapter 10, verse 38 has the catchphrase just punishment as a question. Remember, just in terms of the two different uses of the word. One is if we look at it just as only punishment. Well, no, because Sri Krishna is much, much more than that. But just in terms of what is proper or morally right, yes, he is just punishment. He says that he is just punishment amongst means of preventing lawlessness. And then further, for those seeking victory, he is proper conduct. Amongst secrets, interesting, he is silence. And then in the wise, he is their wisdom. So we saw in the commentary, Swamiji explains how lectures or sermons are just not enough usually for ensuring good behavior. You need a striking, contrasting balance of reward and punishment. Management theory, also the research shows if you can have, for instance, a minute of punishment for wrong actions versus a minute of suitable reward for good actions, that can also rectify people's behaviors. So we even saw this through one of the quiz questions. There is vice. In spite of the existence of vice, we choose or hope to be able to use our free will to make choices to be able to love God. That, of course, is again a good way of staying away from bad or wrong actions. So, again, Sri Krishna, we know, is everything. He manifests as that. And so, one more example in his continuing list he gives is that he is just proper punishment. For those who seek victory, victory is universal, no doubt. We are looking for that desire all the time. He is, again, the proper conduct for those who seek and get victory. Victory that you can get without sacrificing your morals or ethics is the proper righteous victory. Again, that path to get there and the goal, the conduct, everything, Sri Krishna is that. Remember last time, chapter 10, verse 36, he said he is the outcome, right? The victory of the victorious. Today, chapter 10, verse 38, he says he is that path of righteousness, the proper conduct path to get to that victory. Then we see the interesting saying Swamiji mentions. We discussed the secret example. So, a secret, you really have to just keep it to one person, that is yourself or the person who owns that secret. The minute you go to a second person, it's no longer a secret. If it goes to a third person, then that's news shouted out to the rest of the world. The additional example I had given in class is that there's also a saying that you can actually have a secret between two people, but only if one of them is dead. So again, humor there, but to stress the fact of how a secret has to stay with just one person. Supreme most example of secret, therefore, is silence. And because Sri Krishna is listing his vibhutis and opulences, he says that he is that greatest secret. Which one? Silence. And then, of course, we all are on this path seeking wisdom, wisdom through God, from God, and wisdom of God. And today we see that that wisdom itself is God. God is that wisdom that is in the wise. So true wisdom comes as you mature spiritually. Remember, self-realization through knowledge, austerities, etc., but God realization through the grace of God. And when that happens, we get endowed with wisdom. We look at everyone in the relationship of God or their relationship with God. And that wisdom helps us cope through life's struggles, through life's vicissitudes. It's a good English word to revisit. We've seen this much earlier in chapter 2. You can look at it or add it again. Vicissitudes, these changing conditions or fortunes, often in contrasting opposing pairs, so often also known as ups and downs or trials and tribulations. So vicissitudes, that is the trials and tribulations or the ups and downs of life. To be able to cope with those, it is important to have proper wisdom, spiritual wisdom, and that's coming from Sri Krishna. And in fact, if we get to be endowed with that, Sri Krishna is that wisdom who actually then manifests in the wise people. Next up, let's take a look at chapter 10, verse 39. Yachchapi sarvabhutanam bijam tad aham arjuna न तद अस्ति विना यत्स्यान् maya bhutam characharam. So chapter 10, verse 39 has the catchphrase seed, seed, almost repeated words and alliteration. Seed, seed, because Sri Krishna says that he is the generating seed of all living beings. Nothing, whether it's moving or non-moving, can exist without him. So Swamiji explains to us a couple of new terms. Sri Krishna is the efficient cause of all creation, and he is the material cause. As we briefly mentioned in class, look at Aristotle's philosophies. There are four causes or causation concepts: efficient cause, material cause, formal cause, final cause, in a different order, perhaps. But here we see that to be able to exist, to be created, etc., we need to have an origin, a source, a power, and that is the efficient cause. That is Sri Krishna. He involves himself in manifesting the world. And then when something is created, there's an outcome, but material is used. The material from which creation happens is material cause. So that again is Sri Krishna. He then takes us on to a reminder of Bijam. Remember, we saw Bijam is generating seed. We've seen that many times before as well. So in particular, chapter 7, verse 10, we have right here, Bijam, etc. O Arjun, know that I am the eternal seed of all beings. So that's chapter 7, verse 10. And then we also see chapter 9, verse 18. Here, he uses bijam towards the end. Bijam avyayam, eternal seed. I am the storehouse and eternal seed. So you can take a look at those two verses again during your free time. Here, chapter 10, verse 39, he amplifies, expands upon that, and says he is the generating seed of all living beings. In fact, nothing can exist without his potency. He is the origin of everything. And then we see in the second paragraph by Swamiji that there are categorizations of how different living beings are born. Andaj is from eggs, birds, snakes, lizards, etc. Jarayuj, like us humans, born from the womb, also cows, dogs, and cats. Swedaj, sweat, born from sweat. So lice, ticks, etc. And then Udbij, sprout. Bij, bij. Udbij is sprouting from where? That's sprouting from the earth. So you think of plants, etc., trees, creepers, grass, and corn. And then there are other life forms Swamiji mentions, ghosts, evil spirits, manes. Manes we mentioned in class, especially in Roman culture. You've maybe come across the concept when a human has an untimely death, they still want to be in a body, so they float around like that. That's often the concept of a mane. Again, all these different life forms, the origin of them, the source of them, the existence, all that is Sri Krishna. So he is the seed's seed. And so remember, we saw the flyer, see as a question, where's the seed of the seed? So little pun here, we see seed many times and see as well. Remember, the takeaway was you see this seed here sprouting into eventually what will be some kind of a plant, etc. But this seed itself has a seed, and that seed is Sri Krishna. Can you see that? Well, if we can see Sri Krishna everywhere, that's wonderful for our spiritual journeys. But at a minimum, we can see Sri Krishna as always here at the top left. Do we see? Yes, we see Sri Krishna as the bijam, the generating seed, the seed of the seed. The pun also I also mentioned is see when you look at little children sometimes as they're learning English and past tense, everything becomes the D or ED added at the end of the word. So before they know that C becomes saw, they say C becomes seed. I seed the television. I seed the something or whatever. So anyway, little humor there, but seed of the seed, that is Sri Krishna. So next up then, we look at chapter 10, verse 40. Nantosti mama divyanam vibhutinam parantapa esha tudeshatah prokto vibhutir vistaro maya. So, chapter 10, verse 40 has a catchphrase glory galore as a question. Galore, we know, abundance of or plenty. So, yes, glory galore, there is an abundance of glory, Sri Krishna's glories. But is that the end? Nope. We know it's an infinite list. Abundant is also not enough. It's an understatement to describe that. So, yes and no, glory galore. In fact, in this sort of juncture verse, Sri Krishna says there is no end to his divine manifestations. He has said that even earlier before starting the list of these manifestations, because he had said to Arjun, I shall now explain these to you briefly, because there is no end to all my opulences, my glories. So Sri Krishna says that. He actually even uses an appellation we have seen before, Parantapa, O conqueror of enemies. That's Parantapa right here. To again remind him, Arjun was, going through a state of lamentation or delusion. He's gotten thus far to chapter 10. He's asked Sri Krishna how he can think of him, how he can meditate upon him. And Sri Krishna is reminding him, you are a great noble character. You are the conqueror of your enemies, both the real enemies on that battlefield and also the inner enemies, the afflictions, fear, lust, anger, envy, etc. Staying away or being scared of dharma, one's righteous duties, all of that. Sri Krishna is perking up Arjun again at this juncture stage, chapter 10, verse 40, to tell him, here's a finite list, and importantly from there, what he has declared is just a mere sample of his infinite glories. Swamiji, in fact, helps count for us from verses 20 through 39. There are 82 of these infinite opulences mentioned. And then we see in class, we saw a couple of new Sanskrit words, Udeshataha, that's just one portion of that entire list. That list, today we hear it as the breadth of the topic, Vistaraha. As I had mentioned in class, keep this thing in mind, the only one portion part. We'll see that in a couple of weeks when we get to the subsequent verses also. Swamiji raises an important question that if everything is God, why couldn't he just have left it at that and said, Arjun, I am everything, everything is in me, etc., and we're done? Well, it's because he's answering very carefully Arjun's question about how to think about Sri Krishna, how to meditate upon him. And to do that, we, of course, as our minds, we get attracted to the best of things. The senses are drawn to the ones that are most appealing, visually appealing, something that is fragrant or sweet smelling, something that is very, very melodious to the ears, and so on. So why not then talk about all the specialties, the supreme examples of these vibhutis? Therefore, it'll help us, of course, understand and enhance our vision and devotion that eventually, if we can see God everywhere and in everything and in everyone, sort of the example I gave from chapter 5, then we can, of course, appreciate God's existence and manifestation truly everywhere and keep on progressing in our spiritual journeys, as Swamiji says, truly enhancing our devotion. He gives a good example of one of the commercials or advertisements from back in the day in India. And what that analog he's suggesting is that if we can see a manifestation of glory anywhere, we can think of Sri Krishna, then that is a true sign of spiritual progress. So, something again that if we recognize God in anything and everything, big or small, then that is certainly emblematic of us developing and maturing in our spiritual journeys. Let's take a look at a few important Sanskrit words, one or two from each verse that we should keep in mind. Let's look at this one, Jigishatam, amongst those who seek victory. Because remember that desire is universal, as Swamiji says, but we also want that to be through proper conduct. And then we're seeking, wisdom and hopefully trying to become wise. In the wise, when Sri Krishna manifests as wisdom, so in the wise is known as Jnana Vata. Next, chapter 10, verse 39, we've seen before, no harm adding it again, Bijam, generating seed. Many of you will recognize from Hindi as well. And then let's look at Characharam, which is made up of Chara and Acharam, opposing, a pair of words, moving and non-moving. And then finally, chapter 10, verse 40, let's look at these two. We talked towards the end in the commentary. Udeshataha, just one portion. And as I said, keep that in mind for subsequent verses. And then Vistaraha, that is the breadth of the topic, Vistaraha. So that is the important set of words, Udeshataha and Vistaraha from chapter 10, verse 40. With that, we get towards the end of this recap video. Let me bring up the screen again and also mention that in class, we had briefly also done a quick video segment that we showed in class after the recap quiz to connect to something humorously from last time's content. So you can take a look at that. And then, of course, also the Hanuman Chalisa that we briefly talked about, as well as the fact that Hanumanji, today is Hanuman Jayanti, but he's also with us every time in the journey because we talked about how he is on the flag of Arjun's chariot, Kapidhwaj, the flag, the chariot that has Hanumanji as well, his strength and wisdom all along. And again, as one of that manifestations or vibhutis of Sri Krishna himself. So once again, happy Hanuman Jayanti to everybody. As a reminder, next week we shall not meet because of the Bhakti Kirtan retreat. So 2 weeks from today, we'll meet. That is Saturday, 26th April, 2025, 8 a.m. Central Time, 6:30 p.m. India time. Till then, thank you so much. Radhe Radhe.